Parshas Pinchas deals with the sacrificial order that takes place for the community on a daily basis and also on a periodic basis. So the entire second half of Parshas Pinchas deals with the karbanos, the daily karban ola, the tamid, the daily tamid sacrifice, which is a burnt offering, which is 2 sheep that are brought daily, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. It deals with the Shabbos offering, where there's an extra musaf. That's where we get the word musaf for our prayers. The word musaf means an additional offering that's offered in addition to the daily sacrifice. And it deals with the special community karbanos that are offered over the Yom Tovim. Starting with Pesach and then Shavuos, and then going to the high holidays, and then Sukkot. All of those karbanos, all of the sacrificial order, is detailed in this week's parsha. The question many of the commentaries ask is, why is this mentioned over here? It was already mentioned in the book of Vayikra, which is the normative place where we would expect the Torah to detail where karbanos are offered. The standard answer is because there is a need to associate these karbanos with the agricultural norms that are taking place in Eretz Yisrael. And many of the agricultural processes that take place in Eretz Yisrael that we're about to enter into at the end of the book of Bamidbar need to be linked directly to the order, the sacrificial order. But what I'd like to focus on today is an interesting pasuk. The pasuk is right in the middle of the order of the daily tamid sacrifice. Like I said, every morning they would take a sheep and completely incinerate it on the altar. After removing its entrails, first they would move its entrails, sprinkle the blood on the altar, and then completely incinerate the sheep. They would do the same process every afternoon in the mincha time. That's why it's called the mincha period, the afternoon, what's called Beino Arbaim in the afternoon. Every single day without fail. And the community would pay for this. This came from the community chest, that's why everyone every year had to give a half a shekel. You gave your half shekel for the purchase of these communal sacrifices so that every single Jew was represented in the offering of these karbanot. Okay. The Torah says at some point in Perek Chav Ches Pasuk Vav, Olat Tamid, this is the daily burnt offering, Ha'asuya Behar Sinai, that was also done at Mount Sinai, L'reach Nichoach Ishal Ad Hashem, that was for the purpose of offering a savory fragrance as a burnt offering for God. Now, why does the Torah have to make a point of saying that this is the very same burnt offering that was offered at Mount Sinai? Doesn't seem to make any sense. We don't make reference in this way to any of the other karbanos. By the way, this is the same karban that was offered at Mount Sinai. Once we started doing mitzvahs at Har Sinai, presumably it was all done at Har Sinai. So what is this referring to? So Rashi tells us 2 explanations. And the 2 explanations are very important. The first explanation, says Rashi, Ha'asuya behar Sinai, ka'otan shena'asu bimei hamiluim. It was the very same kind of burnt offerings that were done at the time of the consecration of the Mishkan, where Aaron and his sons brought multiple sacrifices, many of them burnt offerings. And the Torah is telling us that this daily sacrifice also was very much resemblant to those initial karbanos. Why is that important? Why is that an important feature? So I think what Rashi is telling us is a very important idea. When you embark on a new, exciting project, whatever it is, the first few days that you start are really exciting and fun. Because everything's new and everything is exciting. But when you bring a sacrifice day after day after day, It can become boring. And what the Torah is telling us is, no, olas timid ha'asuya b'har Sinai. When you bring the daily Tamid sacrifice, make sure you bring it with the same vigor and excitement that you started off with when we were first at Har Sinai some 40 years ago, and this was all new to you. That's, I think, the first message that the Torah is trying to communicate when it says Asuya b'Har Sinai. When Rabbi Taub's been here a few times already since I'm here, and one of his favorite Devar Torahs is the machlokes as to what the most important pasuk in the Torah is. The Medrash debates what is the most important pasuk in the Torah. And one version of the Medrash says that according to Rabbi Akiva, it's ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. According to Ben Ad, love your neighbor as yourself. According to Ben Azai, it is Sefer Toldos Adam. This is the book of the chronicles of all of mankind, that mankind was created in God's image. But according to one opinion in the Medrash, the most important pasuk in the whole Torah is Es hakeves echad ta'aseh b'boker, ve'es hakeves hasheni ta'aseh b'no ha'arbaim. The first sheep should be brought in the morning, and the second sheep should be brought in the afternoon for the daily Tamid sacrifice. So what does the Medrash mean? Why is that the most important pasuk? It's coming to teach us that the way that I do the mundane mitzvahs on a daily basis really defines who I am as a Jew. If I can do those with the same vim and vigor that I do the really monumental things in life, so then that shows that I'm truly a servant of Hashem. If they become stale, and I only get excited about those periodic things, so then it says something else about my devotion and my passion for my attachment to God. So that's the first thing I think that Rashi is telling us. Number two, davar acher. Let's take a look at the second opinion of Rashi. Ha'asuya b'Har Sinai. That this has to be done at Mount Sinai. Do this the same way you did it at Mount Sinai. Hekish olat tamid la'olat Har Sinai. The Torah is connecting the sacrificial order of the daily sacrifice with the sacrifices that were brought atop Mount Sinai. Ota shenitkarva lifnei matan Torah shekatuv ba vayasem ba'aganot v'lamed shetu'una kli. If you look at in Sefer Shemos, where it talks about how Moshe employed a group of young men to bring karbanos before the Torah was given, it says that Moshe took the blood of these sacrifices and placed them into buckets. Into buckets, the blood. Because the purpose of the blood was to splash some of the blood onto the altar. But what this pasuk is telling me is a technical rule. That when you slaughter the sheep, before you're permitted to sprinkle its blood, you have to first collect its blood in a vessel, in a bucket or a bowl of some kind, before you're permitted to sprinkle its blood. And the only way that I know that is because it says in the Torah that those original sacrifices, the blood was placed in buckets. Without that pasuk referencing what was done at Har Sinai, I would not know that the blood has to be placed in buckets. I might think I could just collect it with my hands, or if it falls to the ground, I could scoop it up off the ground and use it to sprinkle on the altar. The answer is no. I must, if I don't collect the blood in a receptacle, then I can no longer use that blood for sprinkling on the altar. It's a very technical rule, but you'd be surprised at how much time, how much space the Talmud devotes to this very technical rule. Rashi is just giving us an abbreviated version of a very technical law that has a lot of details accompanying it. Yes?
You realize that this is all repulsive to all of us. And my question is, why? Why are we doing this? Why does Hashem like this?
Exactly.
It's a very good question. It's an overarching question about why sacrifices are desirable to Hashem.
Can you tell me in 2 sentences?
Well, the Ramban is a famous Ramban. He says you're supposed to view yourself as being the animal on the altar. And whatever happens, the animal is my surrogate. And that's my blood. my blood, my life force that is being presented to God. I'm pouring out my kishkas, I'm pouring out my life towards Hashem. That's my devotion. Of course, you know that the Talmud says that the desire for sacrifices was really lost when the temple was destroyed. The rabbis banished the desire for idolatry. At the same time, the desire for sacrifices was lost to the world. So it's very hard for us to relate to it. Have you ever been to a slaughterhouse?
No.
I have.
Well,
I worked in one.
yeah, so it's not as repulsive if you've ever worked at a slaughterhouse because it's really sort of
I
ordinary.
don't even like to go into a fish store, so.
But you will eat meat, yes?
If I won't buy like tongue. I know some people do that. That's repulsive too.
Okay.
I'm just saying, why is it a reach nichoach to Hashem? Why?
Well, you know, it gets into a much longer discussion. The Rambam feels that there's an overemphasis on karbanos in the Torah to wean us away from idolatry. Others feel that there's intrinsic value to it, regardless of the culture of the time. It really is a much longer discussion. But the fact is that Hashem says that this is a way of your showing your devotion to me. Not human sacrifice. Don't spill any of your own blood, but you take an animal who I've created for the animals to serve humankind. And part of the way that they serve humans is not for it to be consumed by humans, but to be used by humans as a way of elevating themselves emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and bringing us closer to Hashem. So we're supposed to look at what's going on, or think about what's going on in the sacrificial order, and think about how we are really meant to be offering ourselves up to God as a sacrifice. Yes?
I was never in a slaughterhouse, but I have put a pet down. And it's a very powerful, very upsetting experience, and the animal knows. They know.
Yes.
And you feel it, like it's not something that you could just do very lightly. And it's one way of becoming aware of your own
mortality. Mm-hmm. Interesting, yes.
Is this going to happen when the third temple?
Yeah.
Are they going to be doing that again?
You opened up a can of worms there. Well, the prayers that we say certainly indicate that. So I don't know how to answer that other than to say presumably so. But I would also presume that we'll be able to have a better appreciation of it. You know, I'm looking at the news today that comes out, not today, but do you know that we can grow animal tissue, in the laboratory? Who knows? Maybe that'll be the new sacrifice. I don't know. All I can tell you is that the idea of eating a living creature repulses me. And that's why I don't think about it when I take a bite out of my hamburger. But you know, we are we're such hypocrites, aren't we? I mean, I'm speaking about myself, you'll forgive me. But I can't imagine eating another living creature, and yet I do it all the time. Because by the time it gets to my table, it's been beautifully prepared into a roast or a nice piece of chicken. And I don't think that this used to be a living creature walking around with those beautiful eyes, big, wide cow eyes. And that's just the way it is. So I hope that we're all sensitive to the value of life, both animal and human life. But I also recognize that at some point, I don't know how it's going to happen, but at some point, we will all have some level of appreciation for the sacrifices and what they hopefully will accomplish for us. Right now, it's a little bit foreign. Can I just get back to our topic, please?
Yes, in a modern
Because we're running out of time. What?
In a modern world where the temple's going to be in the future, it'll be even more sophisticated.
I think it's all going to be high tech. And I really do. I think everything's going to be so high tech that the rabbis of the Mishnah could not have possibly even foreseen how advanced it's going to be. But within that advancement is going to come a greater prestige in the service of God that will in some way incorporate the old with the new, and I don't know how it's going to happen. But I'm just imagining that it'll be great, and I promise you won't be disappointed.
Apparently everything is written in the Torah.
Well, in some way. Okay, let's take a look at the Shem Mishmuel, if you don't mind. Olaz tamid ha'asuya behar Sinai. So let's take a look. So first he quotes Rashi, which tells us that shetu'una kli. I'm just skipping the line. He says, this teaches us that when you collect the blood, it has to be collected in a receptacle. V'yesh lahavin d'zeh hadin noheg b'chol ha'zivachim. He says, I don't understand. The Torah has a whole book of Leviticus, which is dedicated to the rules and regulations of how to offer karbanot. And this law of making sure that the blood is collected in a receptacle applies to all karbanot equally. Ki b'mishneh nishpach hadam mitzavar ha'behema ala ritzpa ba'asafo pasul. It's quite explicit in the Mishnah in Masechet Zvachim, which deals with the laws of the karbanot, that if the blood spills first on the ground, let's say you have a clumsy Kohen, and he's in charge of it could happen, you got a clumsy Kohen, he's in charge of the karban, and he drops, and he's right there getting ready to collect the blood coming from the animal's neck, right after it's been slaughtered, and he just fumbles or he faints because he can't stand the sight of blood, and the blood spills out on the floor. So they want to just, quickly scoop it up and put it, no. The whole karban is puzzle. Everything's no, you got to slaughter a whole new animal, you've ruined it because it was not collected immediately into a receptacle. He says, and v'sham nishpach min ha'kli ala ritzpa v'asafo kasher v'lama shatik li b'chol tzorat ha'kohanim v'himtin lo ad kan. And then, but there are some times that if it first spills into a receptacle and then spills on the floor, since it first got into receptacle, then it's okay. So this is such an integral law to the law of all karbanos. Why wait until the very end of Bamidbar to teach me such a fundamental rule of karbanos? And we'll skip the rest of the paragraph out of concerns for time. It says, V'nireh. Let's just go to the second paragraph. V'hinei ha'inyan masha dam ta'un kli yesh lomar. He says, perhaps we might suggest, why is it that blood needs to be placed in a receptacle? He says, Shahadam ba'odo ba'alei ha'chayim hu mefuzar u'mitchalek b'chol ivarei haguf v'chiburei ochlin kaman demifreti dameh. He says, without going into too much detail, we have a circulatory system. When the blood is in a living creature, it's constantly flowing and circulating throughout our body. And because of that, it's not viewed as a monolith. It's not viewed as one unit. The blood is it's constantly traveling and moving throughout our body, and it's completely diffuse. It's diffuse throughout our body, and that's a healthy thing. If your blood stopped flowing, you wouldn't survive a second. In a living organism, you need the blood to be diffuse and constantly flowing. However, he says, but when you collect the blood in a receptacle, you are basically taking the life force of the animal and collecting it all in one collected area so that it becomes now homogeneous. No longer diffuse and separate, but one homogeneous unit of blood. And that's the idea of what a receptacle does. A vessel contains all of the liquid and makes it one. And only after it's been collected and unified in a vessel is it ready to be sprinkled on the altar. But this is an allusion to the Jewish people. As a people, the only way that we are fit to be placed on the altar of service is when we are unified and homogeneous and become one. And without going into too much detail because we're running short on time, let me just explain what I think he's alluding to here. It's true that when we're a living organism, we're constantly flowing and running in different directions. And the truth is, the vitality of every single Jewish soul demands that they find their unique entree and their unique expression, like we were talking about before, about not one size fitting all. And there's a place for that. And that's because we are a living organism as the Jewish people, and our blood has to diffuse and circulate throughout. So one Jew may be better at chesed, and another Jew may be better at Torah study, and another Jew may be better at prayer. And everyone's going in their own direction, but at some point, there has to be a collection of the blood force, the life force of the Jewish people in order for us to approach God. And that's represented by the receptacle that contains the blood as it comes out of the body at the time of sacrifice. It represents the homogenization of the Jewish people, which periodically is necessary for us to be able to say that we are one people, just like there is one God in heaven. That's the idea that he's trying to express. And he says at the very end, and I'll just paraphrase it, is that's the reason why the sacrificial order comes right here, right after the story of Pinchas. The story of Pinchas, at face value, is an act of zealotry. But it was also an act of unification. Because, number one, what Pinchas did is that he completely removed that sense of ego from himself. His attitude is that it doesn't matter what people think of me, it doesn't even matter what happens to me. He thought that as soon as he committed this act of zealotry, at the end of last week's parsha, the beginning of this parsha, that they were going to kill him immediately. And he was basically doing a kamikaze mission. It's a suicide mission because he figured they were going to kill him immediately afterwards. Here he is, he's killing the prince of a tribe, the tribe of Shimon. Of course they're going to kill him. It didn't matter. What happens to me is of no consequence because ultimately we are all just a reflection of God. And he's trying to bring the Jewish people to that state of unification by essentially negating any sense of self, any sense of individuality within himself. He's also unifying the Jewish people by removing the things that divide us. So the whole idea, and that's why God rewards him with a covenant of peace, because peace is synonymous with unity. What you've done is to reconstitute and reunify the Jewish people. God therefore says, you will be blessed with a covenant of peace, of eternal life, because that is ultimately when everything is unified in that peace. Immediately following the story of Pinchas, which is the ultimate unification of Klal Yisrael, to refocus ourselves on God and not upon what we want for ourselves, comes the sacrificial order, to remind ourselves that when you think about what's going on in the temple on a daily basis, which, by the way, we do in our daily prayers. I don't know how many of you do the karbanot. It's only optional for women. It's not mandatory. For men, it's mandatory. But we say karbanot every day. We recite the daily Tamid sacrifice order every single day. What we're supposed to be thinking about is what I can do today to collect all of the disparate components of the Jewish people and bring them together in some way. What can I do today as part of my Tamid daily sacrifice, which is the sheep, the meek, submissive animal to God? What can I do to collect us all together and make us one? If we can start thinking about that today, which is the 17th of Tammuz, and make that our focus for the next few weeks until we get to Tisha B'Av, then hopefully we'll have a temple in 3 weeks, if we really do our job. I don't know if it's going to happen. I hope it does. You never know. But the point is that the idea here, the focus of the Parsha, when you think about it from beginning to end, is all about the unification of the Jewish people. There will always be a place for individual expression and the individual Jew's notion of what it means to serve God. But at some point, we all have to come together. The Chassid and the Misnaged, the religious and the non-religious, we all have to figure out how we're going to come together. The Ashkenazi and the Sephardi. We've got to figure it out. And each one of us has to play a role in making that unification happen. So hopefully we'll see it very soon. Hope you have a great day, a meaningful kindness, a meaningful fast. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.